Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation. We think customers.
Hello, Malma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to the program. On tonight's headlines.
Philippine security forces have retrieved the cockpit voice and flight data recorders of a military aircraft that crashed in a coconut grove and killed 52 people.
Search teams have found wreckage of a 26-passenger plane with 28 people aboard that disappeared earlier Tuesday in Russia's far eastern Kamchatka Peninsula.
6 secondary school children were among 9 Hong Kongers arrested on terror charges for allegedly trying to manufacture a powerful explosive.
And rising coronavirus cases in Israel, where most residents are inoculated with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, offer a preliminary signal the vaccine may be less effective in preventing mild illness from the Delta variant, according to a top expert.
That the combination.
Philippine security forces have retrieved the cockpit voice and flight data recorders of a military aircraft that crashed in a coconut grove and killed 52 people. Witnesses and survivors told investigators the plane landed hard and then bounced twice before taking off again, according to Lieutenant General Corleto Vinluan, chief of the Western Mindanao Command. Then he said at the right side of the airport, it hit a tree. That is the account of the injured. Vinluan said most of the dead were soldiers being deployed to the island, a haven for Islamist militants, as part of a counter-insurgency effort. 3 civilians who were not on the flight were also killed as the plane plowed through coconut trees and houses. Another 51 people, mostly troops, were injured. Many suffered severe burns when the 4-engine aircraft exploded into flames. Vinluan said the cockpit voice and flight data recorders, which are known as black boxes, will be sent to the U.S. for analysis. The CVR records flight crew conversations, and the flight data recorder holds information about the speed, altitude, and direction of the plane. And they could explain what caused the C-130, which the military said was in very good condition, to crash in sunny weather. Sunday's crash was one of the country's worst military air disasters and the latest in a series of accidents this year. Last month, a Black Hawk helicopter went down during a nighttime training flight, killing all 6 on board, and the accident prompted the grounding of the country's entire Black Hawk fleet.
In a related news, Russian President Vladimir Putin sent his condolences to the families and friends of those killed in the C-130 military plane crash in Patikulsulu last July 4. The message was conveyed through a telegram dated July 5 to President Rodrigo Duterte, according to Kremlin's website. The letter read, "Dear Mr. President, please accept our deep condolences over the tragic consequences of the crash of a military transport plane on the island of Jolo. I ask you to convey my words of sympathy and support to the families and friends of the victims, as well as wishes for a speedy recovery to all the victims." Aside from Russia, several countries also sent their sympathies to the Philippines, including Australia, France, the United States, Canada, China, Israel, and the Netherlands, among others. In a July 5 statement, Dutch ambassador to the Philippines, Saskia de Lang, said, "I was very sorry upon hearing of the tragic accident last Sunday, July 4, 2021, that took the lives of 43 military personnel and 3 civilians. We share in the grief of the Filipino nation, particularly with the bereaved families of those serving with the armed forces of the Philippines in this very difficult time." She said, "On behalf of the Kingdom of Netherlands, I offer my deepest sympathies to the armed forces, to the families and friends of those deceased and extend my wishes for the swift recovery of those who were injured.
Meanwhile, search teams have found wreckage of the AN-26 passenger plane with 28 people aboard that disappeared earlier today in Russia's far eastern Kamchatka Peninsula, according to the country's aviation agency. The AN-26 was flying from Kamchatka's main city of Petropavlovsk, Kamchatsky to the coastal town of Palana when it disappeared at 2:40 p.m. local time. Valentina Glazova, a spokeswoman for the local transport prosecutor's office, said. Officials said that communication with the plane had been lost 9 kilometers from Palana's airport and 10 minutes before its scheduled landing time. Helicopters, a maritime patrol aircraft, and several ships were already deployed in a search with a focus on the Okhotsk Sea. The aviation agency statement said that the wreckage had been found at 9:06 p.m. local time. It added that the debris was located 4 to 5 kilometers from the airport's runway on the side of the coastline, though it didn't specify whether it was found in the sea. Palana's airport is located 3.3 kilometers from the coastline. Investigation is ongoing.
Meanwhile, thousands were evacuated after a blast and fire at a plastic manufacturing factory in Bangkok. Officials are now monitoring the area for contamination of toxic fumes. We have Crisel Mapa of our EBC Thailand Bureau joining us live for that story. Crisel, please tell us more.
Yes, CJ, a high level of synthetic chemical used extensively in the manufacture of plastics called styrene has been found in a 1 kilometer radius of the Mingdi Chemical Company, where a huge explosion occurred Monday morning, leading to a fire that took more than a day to extinguish. According to a pollution control department, returning to the site is not yet recommended. 1,035.47 parts per million of styrene is found within the 1 kilometer radius, which is close to the level of 1,100 parts per million, which can have serious health impacts. Within 3 to 5 kilometer radius, styrene level is low enough not to impact health. The chemicals found in the black smoke that spread to several areas in Bangkok are hazardous and can cause cancer, according to Associate Professor Wirachai Putdewong of Gasansart University. He also advised to avoid the area and use N95 masks that can filter PM 2.5. Meanwhile, a chemical leak has been admitted by the factory manager to the police, and that the factory stores 1,600 tons of styrene monomer. Caution against the use of rainwater over the next few days has been issued by the meteorological department. Health checks on firefighters and those living in the proximity of the factory is being conducted by the disease control department, adding that inhaling the burned styrene monomer can cause irritation of the respiratory epithelium, headache, dizziness, fatigue, and nausea. Styrene monomer, CJ, is a transparent liquid with a unique odor. Other gases produced from the burned styrene monomer besides styrene are carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and benzene, according to Department Director General Opart Karn Kawin Wong. Meanwhile, there are 7 evacuation sites that have been opened with more than 1,000 people taking refuge. Back to you, CJ.
Thank you so much, Crisel, for your live report there. Please do take care and extend our wishes for everyone's safety over there, Crisel.
Likewise, CJ. Reporting live from Bangkok, Thailand. This is Crisel Mapa. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, Japanese rescue workers are continuing their search for survivors today, 3 days after the devastating mudslide that swept through the coastal city of Atami, killing at least 4 people and leaving 24 others missing. Tyra Liu is following this developing story. Tyra?
More than 1,000 soldiers and rescue workers joined an increasingly desperate search today for survivors in a Japanese resort town devastated by a landslide 3 days ago. 4 people have been confirmed dead after the disaster in Atami in central Japan, and officials said they were still unable to clarify the fate or whereabouts of 24 other residents. Rescuers strolled through destroyed homes and waded across vast piles of mud at the very end of the 72 hours that experts says are crucial in the race to save lives. The landslide descended in several violent waves on Saturday morning during Japan's annual rainy season. It followed days of intense downpours in and around Atami, which is around 90 kilometers or 55 miles southwest of Tokyo. City officials said Monday they had identified one of the dead as 82-year-old Chiyose Suzuki. Her eldest son, Hitoshi, 56, told Kyoto that he regretted not bringing his mother, who could not walk well, with him when police told them to evacuate. Suzuki was taken to hospital by rescuers but died there. The disaster is an added trial as authorities prepare for the Tokyo Olympics, due to start in less than 3 weeks. While Japan is still in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, with cases steadily climbing in the capital and experts suggesting a need for another state of emergency, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga told reporters that rescue workers are doing their utmost to rescue those who may be buried under the mud and waiting for help as soon as possible. 3 Coast Guard ships and 6 military drones were packing up hundreds of troops, firefighters, and others toiling in the rain and fog. Atami reportedly recorded more rainfall in 48 hours than it usually does for the whole of July. And survivors told local media they had never experienced such strong rain in their lives. Scientists say climate change is intensifying Japan's rainy season because a warmer atmosphere holds more water. In 2018, more than 200 people died as devastating floods inundated western Japan, and last year, dozens were killed as the coronavirus pandemic complicated relief efforts. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Tarwin Opiliulu for Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
In other news, tropical storm Elsa was moving over the Florida Straits toward the southern U.S. state Tuesday after battering Cuba with drenching rain and strong winds, but left the Caribbean island without major damage. The U.S. National Hurricane Center reported the storm was now making its way towards the west coast of Florida at 12 miles per hour, with conditions beginning to deteriorate across the Florida Keys, the archipelago at the state's southern tip. A hurricane watch has been issued for portions of the west coast of Florida, the NHC said in its latest advisory at 5 a.m. or 9 o'clock GMT. Elsa has left a trail of destruction through the Caribbean, claiming at least 3 lives, and is expected to gain strength after emerging off the coast of western Cuba Monday evening. Over 100,000 people were evacuated from coastal or low-lying areas as the storm cut through Cuba, with the nation's Meteorological Institute, INSMET, reporting winds of up to 100 kilometers per hour. But its forecasted westward path meant Florida appeared set to avoid the worst of the storm, with the southwest coast of the state set to experience a glancing blow rather than the direct hit expected earlier. Elsa became the first hurricane of the Atlantic season on Friday before weakening to tropical storm status on Saturday. Its advent represented the earliest date ever that a 5th named storm, which does not typically arrive before August, has struck the region.
In Florida, the death toll climbed to 28 Monday in the collapse of a Florida condo tower, where search work resumed after the dangerously unstable remaining portion of the building was brought down with explosives ahead of a coming tropical storm, according to officials. Some 117 people remained missing after the 12-story Champlain Tower South crumbled over a week ago in Surfside. But an Israeli search official put the chances of finding survivors at close to zero. Take a look.
Dangerous and changing conditions. For 12 days, fire, smoke, and now wind and torrential rain. They are continuing the mission and the search of the collapse area. They've worked under this great difficulty, and they have pulled shifts to rotate because that's how much they want to be out there searching. The first responders are the most frustrated by any delays we have experienced. Truly, they live to save lives.
Now, she said the demolition had gone according to plan and that searchers had found 3 more victims in the rubble after work resumed. Authorities had halted work at the site because the unstable structure posed a threat to search and rescue teams, especially ahead of the expected arrival of Tropical Storm Elsa. Now, the imminent arrival of Tropical Storm Elsa, it hit west central Cuba Monday on its way toward the Florida Keys and forced authorities to accelerate the demolition schedule. The collapse in the early hours of June 24 had sparked a massive search and rescue effort, but no survivors have been found. Since that day, experts are looking at possible pre-existing critical flaws in the building structure and are surveying other older high-rises in the area for potential problems.
Some residents of the city of Sacramento in California say their tap water has had an earthy smell and taste in recent weeks. City officials say this is due to an algae that proliferates in warm water when water reservoirs are low. According to officials, however, this is a normal occurrence in the area, but it happens in the fall, not in the summer. Take a look.
We've received some complaints about our drinking water. We've had an earthy taste and odor. It's something that we would typically receive in late summer and fall. And this year we've been receiving these complaints a little bit earlier. The water is safe to drink. It's actually a common occurrence, like I said. It usually happens a little bit later in the year. There are some naturally occurring bacteria that produce a compound called geosmin, and that compound is responsible for some of that earthy taste and odor. Our treatment processes aren't necessarily designed to remove that. Some people are a little more sensitive than others, and what we're telling people to do is either add a little bit of lemon juice or chill their water, and that will neutralize that odor.
What has happened this year is because it was a disappointing rain year and water levels in reservoirs upstream of us are lower. Water temperatures are higher, and also the flows in the river are lower than they normally would be at this time of year. And those two things have sort of combined to create a situation where the musty, earthy tastes are just occurring more sooner than we normally would expect.
It tasted funny. I mean, even though it came out clear, there's like some kind of taste that I can't explain. So when I do my coffee, I always make sure I use a bottled water and stuff like that. The only time I use the water is like for cooking, boiling, stuff like that. Lemon. I mean, I like lemon, but I'm not going to be doing that. No, it should be just clear and it should be tasteless. It should be refreshing, first of all. I mean, especially thousands and millions of people drinking water from the tap, it has to be.
Meanwhile, New Zealand recorded its hottest June on record as temperatures continued to soar in a pattern consistent with global warming, according to a government scientific agency. Daily temperatures averaged 10.6 Celsius or 51.1 Fahrenheit, 1.9 degrees Celsius above average, despite a cold snap late in the month, according to the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, or NIWA. It's huge. There's only been 13 times since 1909 that we've had such an anomaly, according to NIWA scientist Chris Brandolino, telling this to a public radio. He said what's alarming is that over the past 10 years, that has happened 6 times. And Brandolino said that while shorter-term factors such as warmer ocean temperatures helped heat the air over New Zealand, climate change was a constant underlying factor. New Zealand had its 7th hottest year in 2020, which was also the 7th year in a decade that temperatures have been in the top 10 highest ever recorded. The country's center-left Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern declared a climate emergency last year, saying urgent action was needed for the sake of future generations. New Zealand has committed to becoming carbon neutral by 2050 and to generating all its energy from renewable sources in 2035. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights, sharpen your instincts for smart decision making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Welcome back to the news. The Philippines is monitoring developments on the lambda variant, or C37, of the coronavirus that is reportedly more dangerous than the Delta variant. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque made this remark after Malaysia's health ministry announced that the lambda variant, which originated from Peru, has been detected in more than 30 countries in the past 4 weeks. Health Secretary Francisco Duque III, for his part, said there would be strict border control to prevent the variant of that COVID-19 from entering the country. Take a look.
C.37 variant. Sa ngayon po, ito ay napag-alaman kumakalat na sa bansang Peru at sa 35 iba pang Latin American countries. Sa ngayon po, batay po sa submission ating Philippine Genome Center, wala pa po tayong na tukoy o na-discover na C.37 variant. Ito po sa 7,000 na sinequence ng Philippine Genome Center, wala pa po ito. Hindi pa po siya kinikilala ng WHO bilang variant of concern. Sa kasalukuyan, siya po ay isang variant of interest na ang mutation kanila pong nakilala doon po sa spike protein. Alam po natin, yung virus bilog, marami siyang mga spikes. Ito po ay spike proteins at doon sa dating natukoy na variant sa Delta variant, kaya siya variant of interest dahil they share closely the region of mutation. So, kaya kailangan talaga bantayan po natin dahil baka biglang maging variant of concern. So, ano gagawin natin? Patuloy na paigtingin ang ating border control. Okay? Para makasiguro, hindi ito makalusot.
The lambda variant, known to scientists as C.37, was first identified in Peru and has been detected in samples dating back to as early as December 2020. Since then, it has become the dominant variant in the South American country, where it accounts for more than 80% of new infections. The World Health Organization designated the lambda variant as a variant of interest on June 14.
And staying in the Philippines, the government will receive COVID vaccines donated by Japan and the United States this month, according to the National Task Force Against COVID-19. Today, NTF Chief Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. said the Japanese government will send 1 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccines on July 8. The COVAX facility also confirmed the delivery of the 3,024,000 doses of the single-shot Janssen vaccines produced by U.S. pharmaceutical firm Johnson & Johnson within the first half of this month. It'll be followed by additional 2,028,000 doses of AstraZeneca by mid-July. All COVAX donated vaccines and the Janssen jabs will be strictly for priority groups: A2 senior citizens and A3 adults with comorbidities only. Vaccines procured by the government and private sector, including the Japan donated vaccines, will be for A2, A3, and A5 or indigent groups. Galvez said local government units must submit their master lists for the Janssen vaccines.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announces that all legal requirements for wearing face masks and social distancing are likely to end in England on July 19. Take a look.
We will end the 1 metre plus rule on social distancing and the legal obligation to wear a face covering, although guidance will suggest where you might choose to do so, especially when cases are rising and where you come into contact with people you don't normally meet in enclosed spaces, such as obviously crowded public transport. It will no longer be necessary for government to instruct people to work from home, so employers will be able to start planning a safe return to the workplace. There will be no COVID certificate required as a condition of entry to any venue or event, although businesses and events can certainly make use of certification, and the NHS app gives you a COVID pass as one way to show your COVID status. We are trying to move from a system of very elaborate government rules to one in which we rely on people to exercise personal responsibility to follow guidance, mindful that, as I say, this pandemic is far from over. And recognising the protection afforded by 2 doses of vaccine, we will work with the travel industry towards removing the need for fully vaccinated arrivals to isolate on return from an amber country.
England's chief medical officer, Chris Whitty, said he would still wear a mask in any situation which is indoors and crowded, or if someone else is uncomfortable, as a point of common courtesy. And he hinted at possible tension between scientists and ministers, telling a news conference, ministers decide, advisors advise. A Snap YouGov poll, meanwhile, suggested that 71% of Britons believe face masks should continue to be mandatory on public transport. Opposition politicians warned Johnson was moving too fast. The government has already relaxed the ban on major events to allow 60,000 football fans to attend the semi-finals and final of the European Championship at London's Wembley Stadium, 2/3 of its capacity.
Meanwhile, Indonesia is sourcing emergency oxygen for virus patients from neighboring Singapore. And they're calling for help from other countries, including China, with the archipelago slammed by its deadliest COVID-19 wave, according to the government. Around 10,000 concentrators devices that generate oxygen were to be shipped from the city-state, with some arriving by a Hercules cargo plane earlier today, according to officials. Let's listen in.
Dulu, di tempatnya kan dekat ada, sekarang dari kemarin pusatnya udah.
Now, Senior Minister Luhut Binsar Panjaitan ordered all the nation's oxygen supply sent to hospitals overflowing with coronavirus patients, warning Indonesia could face a worst-case scenario where infections skyrocket to 50,000 a day, a crisis driven by the highly infectious Delta variant. Indonesia's overwhelmed healthcare system is reeling as jammed hospitals turn away patients, forcing desperate families to hunt for oxygen tanks to treat the sick and dying at home. More than a dozen hospitals in Indonesia's second biggest city, Surabaya, are now full and not taking any more patients, according to authorities. The world's fourth most populous nation has seen its daily caseload more than quadruple in less than a month, and its tally stands at 2.3 million cases and 61,140 deaths. And that figure is widely believed to be a severe undercount due to low testing and poor tracing measures. Daily COVID-19 burials in the hard-hit capital, Jakarta, are up tenfold since May, according to the government. Indonesia is scrambling to ramp up plans to inoculate over 180 million of its nearly 270 million people by early next year. But so far, only about 5% of the total population has received 2 jabs.
Bang, itu mau beli atau udah selesai atau baru mengisi?
Rising coronavirus cases in Israel, where most residents are inoculated with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, offer a preliminary signal. The vaccine may be less effective in preventing mild illness from the Delta variant, according to a top expert. Let's listen in.
The Delta strain has changed the transmission dynamics everywhere, and in Israel also. We know it is more infectious from person to person. We also know it has some better capacity to evade the immune system as compared to the Alpha strain. So we have to take into account that it will disseminate in every country it reaches and would put a serious challenge on the local health authorities in trying to contain it. It does seem, however, that the vaccines are effective, perhaps not to the exact same extent, but they are effective in preventing the dissemination, and we hope that the combination of the vaccine wall we have created with some additional measures we're taking, including masks and some additional measures, will be enough to further contain the disease at its point. It is too early at this point to say decisively what is the vaccine effectiveness against infection and mild illness according to the Israeli data, not only because the numbers are still small, but also because of the cases, the exposure and the testing are not evenly distributed. And so there's a lot of bias that comes into these types of calculations. So we are in the process of properly analyzing the data to be able to say something with confidence on the exact vaccine effectiveness for mild disease. According to the data coming from other countries, it does seem the vaccine is exceedingly effective in preventing severe illness and death. In Israel, it's a little too early to say. We have now had 12 days of zero mortality, which is a good signal, but it does not yet reflect the recent rise in overall cases we've seen in the last week and a half. The number of severe cases and mortality would only be expected to be seen a week or so from now, so we need to wait to make sure. There is an increasing body of evidence from many countries that among children there are, in fact, long COVID complications in a significant proportion. And I think this is one of the reasons why we should make our best efforts to contain the disease and maintain its dissemination, even within the pediatric population, which in general has much lower tendency for severe complications.
Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett warned Sunday ahead of a weekly cabinet meeting that with the Delta variant running amok, Israel may have to reintroduce certain restrictions that were lifted last month to curb transmission. Mr. Balicer said it was unlikely Israel could contain rising cases without further restrictions being reimposed, but voiced hope they would be mild and that Israel's vaccine wall of inoculated citizens will help reduce further spread.
In other news, 6 secondary school children were among 9 Hong Kongers arrested on terror charges for allegedly trying to manufacture a powerful explosive, according to police. Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam has urged parents and teachers to report on teenagers who break the law. Take a look.
They have been exposed to hate messages, the and they have been influenced in hating the government and also the police. They have also been incited to taking radical actions. On the 1st of July this year, there was a perpetrator who assaulted and attempted to murder a police officer who is performing his duty. After that, he committed suicide. This is an alarm. There are also other acts. Say, for example, in the small hours, a suspected case of arson at the government house. And in the streets of Hong Kong, police have recovered imitation firearms and weapons. 2 people have been arrested, and the police have seized some raw materials for the production of explosives. And they have also made arrests in relation to the dissemination of threatening messages, say, for example, bomb threat made at my office, police officers, as well as the liaison office. My office has received an envelope containing white powder.
Lam said residents should not be deceived by messages circulating online suggesting the government had any responsibility for the violence or by slogans such as "There's no violence, only tyranny." 5 males and 4 females aged between 15 and 39 were arrested on Monday on suspicion of conspiracy to use explosives for terrorist activities. Senior Superintendent Steve Lee from the city's new National Security Unit said that the operation they conducted yesterday was against gangsters who tried to manufacture TATP explosive inside a homemade laboratory inside a hostel. And police said the 9 people belonged to a pro-independence group that called itself Returning Valiant. Now, those arrested, including 6 teenage students and 3 adults who worked at a local university, a secondary school, and as a driver. Mr. Lee said they were planning to attack public facilities, including a cross-harbor tunnel, the railway network, and courtrooms to maximize damage to society. Police also said they seized various items from the group, including a small amount of explosives, raw materials to produce TATP, air guns, mobile phones, SIM cards, an operating manual on how to plant bombs, and plans to leave the city. They also found some 90,000 Hong Kong dollars in cash and froze around $600,000 Hong Kong dollars in related bank accounts. Anti-government sentiment exploded there in 2019 during massive and often violent pro-democracy protests that were stamped out with arrests and a new national security law. While stability has been widely enforced, Hong Kong remains a deeply polarized city where many residents still seethe under Beijing's rule.
Hong Kong's leader on Tuesday brushed off a warning by major tech companies, including Google, Facebook, and Twitter, that they may quit the financial hub if authorities push ahead with a new privacy law. City authorities have unveiled plans to pass a new law targeting doxing, or the act of publishing someone's private details online so they can be harassed by others. Take a look.
其實香港國安法並冇好似初期有啲人對佢嘅詆毀、污蔑、抹黑而出現咗嗰啲情況。咁所以呢條私隱條例一樣，我哋嘅目的呢就係針對呢啲非法嘅起底行為，亦都係賦權俾私隱專員呢可以進行一啲調查同埋採取呢啲行動，只此而已嚇。不過，如果有一啲從事呢啲網絡嘅平台嘅公司係有關注呢，我相信私隱專員呢都係樂意同佢哋見面，就聽下佢哋嘅關注喺邊度。
The broad wording of the proposed legislation has spooked major tech companies who fear they could be held liable and their employees prosecuted for users' content. They detailed their concerns in a letter sent to Hong Kong's government by the Asia Internet Coalition, which includes tech giants such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Apple. Introducing sanctions aimed at individuals is not aligned with global norms and trends. The letter, which was dated June 25, but made public this week, warned the only way to avoid these sanctions for technology companies would be to refrain from investing and offering their services in Hong Kong, thereby depriving Hong Kong businesses and consumers, whilst also creating new barriers to trade, it added. Lam added that the city's Privacy Commission would be happy to meet with tech industry representatives to deal with any anxieties they might have.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has urged his French and German counterparts to not join with the administration of U.S. President Joe Biden in pursuing a hardline stance against China, that according to the state-run media today. President Xi's remarks during an online summit with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, carried by the official Xinhua news agency, came after President Biden visited European nations and agreed to increase cooperation with them. The French presidency added that they had both raised the issue of human rights in China and reaffirmed demands concerning the fight against forced labor, a presumed reference to the situation in China's western Xinjiang province. Rights groups believe at least 1 million Uyghurs and other mostly Muslim minorities have been put into camps, with forced labor common and some women forcibly sterilized. But President Xi was also quoted as telling Macron and Merkel that the world more than ever needs mutual respect and close collaboration rather than suspicion, antagonism, or zero-sum games, as President Biden is seen to be trying to contain China on the global stage.
In other news, 4 men received lengthy prison sentences in Germany on Tuesday for taking part in the repeated sexual assault of children and filming the abuse in a case that prompted reform of pedophilia laws. A regional court in the western city of Münster jailed the defendants for between 10 and 14 years, followed by preventive detention. The mother of the 28-year-old main defendant was convicted of aiding and abetting the abuse and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Presiding Judge Matthias Fehler expressed shock at the horrific events covered in the trial, calling the video recordings deeply disturbing. Fehler said he was relieved none of the victims had to testify in the trial. The principal defendant, a computer technician identified only as Adrian V., was found to have trapped boys in a garden shed in April 2020, along with several male accomplices, drugged them and raped them repeatedly over the course of 3 days. One of the victims, now 11 years old, was the son of his girlfriend. Prosecutors presented some 30 hours of video evidence, much of which had been shared in darknet forums. The other men, aged 31 to 43, are believed to have met Adrian V. online. The chief defendant's mother, Karina V., who owns the shed, was found to have been aware of the abuse. The court heard that she had brought the men breakfast while they took turns assaulting the children. Police are still screening evidence uncovered from the abuse in the shed and have used it to identify suspects across Germany and abroad. 5 men have already been convicted and sentenced in connection with the case, and investigators have identified 50 suspects, of whom around 30 are now in custody. Eagle News will be back with more updates. Please don't go away.
Bank of Commerce. What we are is personal banking, where we understand that every deposit is your hard-earned money. Every loan is for good reason. Every service aids in your convenience. Every business of ours is meant to grow yours. We hear you, feel you, and we act on your every banking need. Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Back here in the country, the Department of Education on Monday demanded a public apology from the World Bank following its report that over 80% of Filipino students fall below the minimum proficiency levels. In a palace briefing, Education Secretary Leonor Briones slammed the World Bank for using old data and outdated assessments as the basis of its report and releasing it without following the country's protocols. The World Bank said there's a crisis in Philippine education, which started pre-COVID-19 or coronavirus disease and have been made worse by the coronavirus pandemic. Take a look.
Punto na gusto kong ituro dahil sa tatlong kakulangang ito na nalagay sa hindi magandang una, lumang datos na alam na ng lahat, alam na ng congressman, alam na ng lahat ng critics ng education dahil nalabas na ito. Pangalawa, walang excuse me. Hindi namin alam. Ang practice is ipaalam mo sa isang bansa kung pagpadala ka ng report ng ganyan sa publiko. Nauna ang media. Pangatlo, hindi sinama yung mga bagong developments na ang daming tumutulong ngayon dahil concerned ang buong bansa sa estado ng edukasyon. And finally, matagal na partner na ang World Bank since 1981. Marami na tayong inutang sa World Bank para mag-improve sa edukasyon. So, partner sila, kasali sila dito sa sitwasyon sa world, sa Pilipinas, at saka ngayon, we are winding up negotiations na hindi pa na pirmahan ng Secretary of Education itong $110 million at $100 million na uutangin ulit sa World Bank. So, we would like the public to be aware of this. And since the country was insulted, was shamed, and so on, we expect and look forward to a public apology. Lalo na yung di pagsabi sa amin na naglabas sila ng ganong klaseng datos na lumang-luma na datos.
Now, as he prepares to blast off into a new career stage, Jeff Bezos leaves an enduring legacy after transforming Amazon from a modest online bookseller into one of the world's most powerful corporations. Bezos, 57 years old, was set to hand over the job of Amazon chief executive on Monday to Andy Jassy and turn his attention to his private space exploration firm, philanthropy, and other endeavors. He will retain a key role, however, as executive chair at the technology and e-commerce colossus he founded 27 years ago. The transition comes after a spectacular streak for Amazon, which has drawn attention for its innovations. But the firm has also been vilified over business practices that have crushed competitors and raised concerns over treatment of a workforce of more than 1 million. His departure leaves questions about the future of Amazon as it faces a torrent of regulatory scrutiny and criticisms from activists. U.S. lawmakers are considering a measure that would make it easier to break up Amazon amid concerns that a handful of big tech firms have become too dominant, hurting competition in a way that eventually harms consumers. Amazon was well positioned during the coronavirus pandemic with its fast delivery of goods and groceries and boosted its U.S. workforce to more than 800,000. While the company has boasted of its $15 minimum wage and other benefits, critics say its relentless focus on efficiency and worker surveillance has treated employees like machines.
Hundreds of Swedish supermarkets remained shut Tuesday after a major cyber attack that has crippled hundreds of companies worldwide for the past 4 days, with the perpetrators demanding $70 million in Bitcoin to undo the damage. Kaseya, the Miami-based IT company at the center of the hack, said late Monday that up to 1,500 businesses had been affected by Friday's attack, which has been blamed on Russian-speaking hackers. Experts believe this could be the biggest ransomware attack on record, an increasingly lucrative form of digital hostage-taking in which hackers encrypt victims' data and then demand money for restored access. The Kaseya attack has ricocheted around the world, affecting businesses from pharmacies to gas stations in at least 17 countries, as well as dozens of New Zealand kindergartens. Revel, a group of Russian-speaking hackers who are prolific perpetrators of ransomware attacks, are believed to be behind Friday's assault. A post on Happy Blog, a site on the dark web associated with the group, claimed responsibility for the attack, saying it had infected more than 1 million systems. The hackers demanded $70 million in Bitcoin in exchange for the publication of an online tool that would decrypt the stolen data.
Denmark train in Helsingør as they prepare to take on England in the Euro 2020 semi-finals on Wednesday. More from Patricia Rodriguez from our EBC UK Bureau.
Peter Schmeichel says son Casper will be ready for penalties if needed when Denmark takes on England in the Euro 2020 semi-finals on Wednesday. He warns that the Danes should not be underestimated. Peter Schmeichel was a former Manchester United goalkeeper and part of the Danish team that stunned the world in 1992 when they won the European Championship for the first and only time after receiving a late call-up to the tournament when the former Yugoslavia were disqualified. Schmeichel Sr. kept a clean sheet against England in a Group 1 stalemate, but more crucially was able to deny Marco van Basten from the spot in a 5-4 penalty shootout success over the Netherlands in the last 4 before he shut out Germany in the final to help his country claim silverware. England are favorites to progress at Wembley on Wednesday and reach a first-ever European Championship final. However, Schmeichel warned Gareth Southgate's side not to underestimate Denmark, who have recovered from the trauma of Christian Eriksen's on-pitch cardiac arrest to reach the last 4. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Patricia Rodriguez. We live in interesting times.
And the famed Cannes Film Festival opens, and despite social distancing subduing some of its signature glamour, excitement is rife for the first fully fledged film festival since the start of the pandemic. Last year's edition was canceled over the health crisis, and although stars will be allowed to go maskless on the red carpet this year, a health pass is still required for entrance, and many of the glitzy after parties that are the festival's calling card have been postponed because of the distancing measures. Take a look.
Cannes est un festival que j'adore. J'y viens tous les ans depuis une dizaine d'années. Et voilà, réouvrir un peu la vie culturelle, la vie cinématographique avec un film de Léos Carax au Festival de Cannes, c'est une très grande joie.
I flew in this morning and then fly out tomorrow night and in the middle of shooting something, but it is surreal to be here. This is my favorite festival, Cannes. I've always, before I came here, looked at it as a marker of great films. So not that COVID is not going on, but now for the festival opening up again and being here as the opening film with Leos in particular, this thing that we've been working on for 7 years is a sense of relief, and excitement, I guess.
Today, the Cannes Film Festival, delayed from May to July, will finally open its doors for the 74th and maybe most critical edition. Its famed red carpet will again flood with stars. The screens will be relit and maybe the movies will rekindle some romance and grandeur that went dormant this past pandemic year. Now, this year, after much of the movie world went into hibernation, Cannes' greatest duty may be jolting movie-going awake. Announcing the lineup last month, Cannes artistic director Thierry Fremont declared cinema is not dead. Cannes will be the first major film festival to attempt an essentially full edition. There will be no virtual component, no empty seats between masked festival goers. Attendees are required to be vaccinated or tested for COVID-19 every 48 hours. Ready or not, the throngs will be back on the Crozet, the French Riviera's city's main drag.
RTM6, je suis pas validé par RTM6, hein. Bon, j'ai encore du boulot à faire. Ça y est, ça y est, ça y est. Tant que t'es validé par Bolloré, ça va, tu vas pouvoir travailler.
I can't wait for our turn to open our theaters.
That's true.
Congratulations to the film industry for that. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. We'll see you again tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and
we live
in interesting times.
This program is supported by Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation. We think customers.